So the Arafura Games have returned to Darwin after so many years missing. 2011 the last time, but here we are 2019 in April, May. 8 days of competition, 40 countries coming along to be part of it, 1,500 athletes, 800 people doing a lot of the volunteering work, and 15 different sports to be participated in. But just as importantly, some journalists joined us in the top end from other countries, and two join me today from the Philippines. They'll join us to talk a little bit about what happens in their country, what did they think of the Arafura Games, and just as importantly, what did they think of their time in Darwin. So joining me first, I can introduce to you Beatrice Go. Hello Beatrice, how are you going?
Hi Charlie.
Tell us your story.
So my story is I came to Australia through the ABC Women in News and Sports program. I work as a multimedia sports reporter for Rappler, which is a startup news company for online journalism.
Okay, and with us also is Chicky Pablo, who's joined us also from the Philippines. What's your story?
That's right. I work for ESPN5. I'm a sports analyst there, and I came to Darwin to cover the Arafura Games.
So how did you first hear about the Arafura Games? I know they were pushing it out to the countries to find out about it, but when did you first find out about it?
I first found out about it through the ABC, the Women in News and Sports program, when Karen Shrewsbury, she's the international program director, and she was the one who invited us to go and apply for the 2019 Arafura Games. It's a great opportunity for women sports journalists to cover big multi-sport events like the Arafura Games.
And were you the same, Chicky?
Yeah, actually, there was an invite sent to us through email about the mentorship program, and all we had to do was send our pitch, and they had to choose the best pitch, and then they were able to take us, and it's been fun.
Okay, so you had to go through a selection process.
Yes.
Well, congratulations for being selected, I should say.
Thank you.
That first time. What did they tell you about Australia and about Darwin and about the Arafura Games? Did you get much information about all of that?
At first, when I heard that it was going to be held in Darwin, I was like, wow, where is Darwin? No one in the Philippines actually is familiar with Darwin. Even the Filipinos living in Australia, everyone just knows about Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, but not Darwin. So it was a bit of a shock that, wow, I am going into Darwin not expecting anything at all.
And what about you, Chicky?
Well, just like me, I expected it to be something like Sydney, but then I did some research, and then I realized, I was gearing up for winter, but then I did my research and I saw that the weather here is very similar to our weather in the Philippines. So I repacked, edited my suitcase, and got the right clothes in there, and I was just raring to go. It's the first time in Arafura, first time in Darwin. I was game for a new challenge.
Okay, now tell us about, because are you both from Manila?
Yes.
Yes.
Now Manila's a big, big city, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about Manila and your life back home.
So Manila is really busy. Everyone would know Manila as for its traffic, actually. Not like here in Darwin. In Darwin, there are only 280,000 people, but then in Manila, there are 13.7 million people just in the Metro Manila.
Wow. In the city itself?
Yes.
Wow. I don't know how many cars that would be.
I know.
A lot.
Yeah. And so do you know each other from Manila, or did you meet for the first time when you came here?
We met for the first time during a WINS program. We were in a seminar conducted by WINS last year, and that's where I first met Bea.
Okay. Okay. So what's your life like in Manila?
Well, I work for ESPN5, and what I do is I go to coverages, mainly for volleyball. And so when I got assigned to do several sporting events like table tennis and, athletics, it was all new to me, and I was a little bit nervous about it, but training from Shannon and Karen really did help.
Yeah, and Shannon Byrne we're talking about, who's been helping
Shannon
out.
Byrne.
She's from ABC in Sydney. I'm always interested in the first impressions of people who come to Darwin when they arrive. You jump on the plane, you fly, you probably had to go some roundabout way to get here, and then you arrive in Darwin. What was your first impressions?
My first impression was I was expecting some kangaroos to pop up or some crocodiles to be in the swamp, because that's what they told us. It's sort of like the outback Australia. But then but then it actually surprised me because like the city is well developed. There are only a few people as well, not like back in Manila or maybe in the bigger cities like Sydney and Melbourne. And the sun here is quite hot. Like not like in the Philippines, it's quite humid, but then here it just kind of burns your skin.
Okay, I'm going to ask you in a minute if you've seen a kangaroo and a crocodile, but what about, what about you? What did you think?
Yeah, well, there were not much cars in the streets, so I was a little bit surprised about that. The roads are smoothly paved, not like in our country. There are a lot of potholes, sadly. No traffic here, and the biggest difference is that whenever I cross the street, I have to look to the right first, because in the Philippines, it's looking to the left, because we're left-handed.
So now tell us about kangaroos and crocodiles. Have you seen any since you've been here?
Yes, I went to Crocodilos Park with Miss Chiki and our friend from the Solomon Islands, Elizabeth. Yes, so we were able to see huge saltwater crocodiles. It's my first time to like get close to a crocodile because they were like, oh, why don't you touch this crocodile, like a friendly American alligator. I was like, no, thank you. But then like Miss Chiki was able to feed the crocodiles. Yes.
Yeah.
And what about kangaroos?
Kangaroos? Oh yeah, there was like a joey that was just resting there. So and I was able to take a selfie with it.
Oh, good. And you, Chiki?
Yeah, you know, when we were kind of late for the tour of the feeding of the crocodiles, but when the tourist guide said, okay, now who wants to feed the crocodile? I was like, me, I'd like to feed the crocodile. And we were like the newest in the group because we just ran after that group that had already started the tour. And then we went to another crocodile, a big one, and she goes, okay, so who wants to feed another crocodile? And I said, I'd like to feed another crocodile. But the girl said, another one who hasn't fed the crocodile. So I was like, oh.
And then the Arafura Games, then all of a sudden you had to get involved in all these different sports.
I did cover the 2018 Asian Games for Rappler in the Philippines. So when I got there, it was more of the training that I was looking forward to with Shannon. So it's my first time doing radio and my first time doing live crosses as well. So I was able to watch some, not only the Philippine events, but also the Australian events like the indigenous roos and the indigenous koalas as well in the football match. And then I was able to do live crosses with you.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the indigenous involvement in the Arafura Games in just a moment. But what about you? What did you think of the Arafura Games?
It's so different because, well, first of all, I was surprised that there are over 800 volunteers, not salaried, but they just come here and they help. And I was like, that still happens? You know, I was talking to Shannon Byrne this morning and I was trying to compose myself because I was reading all these articles about players coming here for the first time to wear shoes, first time to run in a track oval, first time to ride a plane, and then the volunteers of, you know, preparing the meals for thousands of athletes. I mean, they don't get paid. So I'm like, getting teary-eyed again. And you know, when I used to play, when I go to the competition venue, I'm there really just wanting to win, not talking to anybody because, you know, lest they see my weakness. But here, everybody's just so kind and it's just very different.
Yeah, yeah. And you were at a remarkable event with a Filipino runner out at the Arafura track. Tell us that story.
Yes, so Abigail Manzano, she won the 3,000 meter women's steeplechase, and that was the first gold medal in the 2019 Arafura Games Athletics Tournament. And she was actually the lone competitor of the event. So she had to run alone. Imagine just running 3,000 meters alone on the track, and she didn't have to run it because she could be awarded the gold medal immediately, but then she was like, no, I want to run this because I want to prove to everyone here that I deserve the gold medal.
Isn't that a great story? That's the spirit of what Arafura Games are all about. Do you have a story, Chiki, of something similar that you experienced, that you came across?
Yeah, well, yesterday I was just told of a story, but not a personal experience that I've seen. But an athlete, a basketball player from Malaysia. He checked in his luggage at the airport, and then when he got to Darwin, no luggage. He was here, but his luggage was somewhere else. And so he didn't have shoes for basketball, and they were going to have a game that day. So a guy from Darwin lent him shoes so that he could play. And then after that, you'd see the players, they're slugging it out in the court, but after the game, they're out there taking selfies with each other. So that's really nice to see.
Yeah, it is. And so Indigenous people are involved here. The opening ceremony, you would have seen the Arafura people, the traditional owners of the land that we walk on here in Darwin, so you would have seen them performing. But you would have seen, as you mentioned, the Roos and the Koalas and so on were teams that were actually participating. What have you learned about Indigenous Australians whilst you've been here? Is there much that you'll take away in that regard?
Well, it's my first encounter with the Indigenous people of Australia, because it's also my first time in Australia, and then I was able to interview some of the Roos and the Koalas, and it's actually their first time competing in an international competition like the Arafura Games, and they're just so proud of themselves. The other football players that I've interviewed, they're usually like so tense, and they would just like go for a media interview then leave. But then in here, like I was able to make friends with them. Like they've already added me on Instagram. I've tagged them in some photos. I sent them some photos, and then we were just taking selfies together. I think that's the great thing about these Indigenous teams, and they're actually really good. I interviewed some fans of the Indigenous Roos, and they just became fans of the Indigenous Roos just because they're actually good. They just found out that they're actually good. Yeah.
Okay. And what about your experience with Indigenous Australians here?
Yeah, I'm really, really glad that there's such a program as having them play already in good tournaments like the Arafura Games, because I would have missed a lot if I didn't meet any of them. I mean, they're just really cool people. They're fun to be with. They have ready smiles on their faces, and it's just, I don't even know them, and yet they're so welcoming. And I'm so glad I got the chance to meet some of them.
Now, I was wondering if you look down that camera there and give a message to all of the athletes and all of the volunteers who are all being part of these Arafura Games. Is there something you'd like to say to them?
Hi, so congratulations to all the athletes who have won medals, and to all the volunteers who have worked so hard in welcoming these athletes, making them feel at home here in Darwin. You guys did a great job. So proud.
So I'd like to just also congratulate all the athletes, para-athletes. You have made my world very different, and you guys are creating a big difference in this world just by your mere presence in the Arafura Games. And I'd also like to thank all the volunteers. I don't even know who you are, but you are also very welcoming, and you would just let my nerves fly out the window. So thank you and congratulations, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Arafura Games ahead.
And joining us also is Elizabeth Osterfellow from the Solomon Islands, part of the journalists from overseas that are here for these Arafura Games. Elizabeth, nice to talk to you. What's your story?
My story is that I found out about the Arafura Games through ABC Wins program, and this is actually my second time in the program. It was an invite, I applied for it, and yes, I'm here in Darwin.
Had you been to Darwin before?
No, actually, this is my first time to be in Darwin. I've been to Australia, but that was way a long time ago. So basically coming through Brisbane Airport, a lot has changed since the last time I came through.
I'm sure. How long ago was that?
I think that was in 2004, if I can remember correctly.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
That was a long time.
Tell us about your life on the Solomon Islands.
Solomon Islands, I am a journalist by profession. I have just completed my studies last year. I am currently a freelance, and I live in Honiara. I've been currently now, but I've been living in Fiji for the past 4 years.
And the other ladies we were talking to were telling us how big Manila is in comparison to Darwin. I suppose Honiara, how big's Honiara in comparison to Darwin?
Honiara is a chain of islands, of little scattered islands. So the population is about probably 600,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your impressions when you arrived in Darwin? I'd imagine there'd be some similarities with the tropical lifestyle we lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my first impression, as soon as I got off the airport, and then it was a bit colder when I came through because I transit through Brisbane. But as soon as I got off at the Darwin airport, bam, it was warm, and I'm like, perfect. It's just like home.
And then when you travelled around Darwin or travelled into Darwin, did you see things that seemed a bit familiar to you?
The main thing that I realized was it was so quiet and everything was so slow. Not like other parts of Australia, I can assume, but so we kind of like asked ourselves, me and my other two colleagues from the Philippines, is this normal or is this not normal? Because it's just so peaceful, it's just right.
Mm. And you went to the opening ceremony of the Arafura Games. What did you make of that?
It was amazing, and also I also spoke to a lot of people that night that the cultural performance was the highlight. A lot of people actually enjoyed the cultural performances from not all, but most of the Pacific Island countries, so that was beautiful.
Mm. Did you know much about Indigenous Australians before you came to the Arafura Games?
Not much, to be honest, about the Indigenous people, but we were very fortunate to go to the Mindel market, where we saw a lot of art, and then a lot of the people, they told stories about, some cultures. I learned a lot from that time that we went, yeah.
And you talked about strong cultures and whatever, but you have a cultural connection to crocodiles. Could you explain that to us?
Okay, that night when we went to the Mendel market, my colleagues had some crocodile meat. They had a taste of the crocodile meat. Well, I couldn't have it because when I was little, growing up, I heard from stories from my mother that it was a taboo. We are not allowed to have crocodile meat or shark meat.
Okay, and then when the sport started, the Arafura Games got underway, what did you make of all the competition, and did you then start to see Indigenous people involved in some of the sports?
Yes, the beautiful thing about it, covering the Arafura Games, the highlight for me was the sportsmanship and the friendliness of the friendly games of the Arafura Games. So it was really beautiful to see the relationships amongst the athletes. So yeah, that was one of the highlights of the games for me.
And was there one event or one thing that stood out for you that you'll take away as a memory when you were out watching the different sports?
Yeah, because we're trained to cover these sports events, so we were very lucky to cover some of the sporting events that wasn't, you're not really familiar with. For example, for me, it was the first time for me to go to a swimming competition. I had to cover that. In the Solomon Islands, we don't have a swimming pool, but we have a swimming team who train in the ocean, and they're competing here at the Arafura Games in a pool. So that was my first time. I didn't know we had a swimming team until I got to Darwin, and then I found out that we have a swimming team. So it's like, oh, okay. So the nature of the Arafura Games is that it's friendly. It's not really like the competing side of things, but some other countries, they are serious about it because they are preparing for the World Championships, like for example in swimming, and also they are preparing themselves for the South Pacific Games, which after this event, the final squad who will be going to the South Pacific Games will come out after this event.
And from what you've learned here, will it be valuable for you in your career when you go back home?
Oh, definitely, because in the Solomon Islands, we do not have a sports reporter who is female.
Okay.
This training actually is very beneficial to me in my career as a journalist.
And when you go home, Elizabeth, and they say to you, what was it like? What would you be able to say to people back home?
I could say that I could see myself living in Darwin because it's so friendly, it's familiar to home.
And would you like to say something to the 1,500 athletes that were here, the 800 volunteers that were here? Is there a message you'd like to say to them?
Oh, I would like to say to the athletes who have already competed in their events, good job, well done. And to the volunteers and organizers of the Arafura Games, beautiful people, beautiful hearts, and thank you for making all of this come together.